Okay, so we're going to be talking about how to create classes. So chapter 2, we learn about how we were using classes and objects. So one thing that we learned in chapter 2 was you need to create an object and then use it. And here we're going to define how we're going to create those classes to create objects. So that's what we're going to go through it. And then, of course, how we're going to implement them. And constructors, basically, when you're building an object, while you're building it, you will be able to set certain things for it. And that's going to be the constructor. I just touched it a little bit in chapter 2. We're going to spend some time on it in chapter 3. How to access instance variable and local variable, and Javadoc. Most likely these are going to be something we're going to do next week. And then implement classes for drawing graphical shapes. So if you are not coming from CS2, you should kind of review this and get into the last part. If you're coming from CS2, you got to spend a lot of time in this chapter because they have things that you haven't seen before. But we will make it through. Okay, so to illustrate this, your book is going to be using something called tally. So we have this object that's going to be, so to explain it for those who haven't seen it, this is an old-fashioned way of counting people going into an arena. So you go to a place, somebody's standing by the door, and it's counting how many people are going in. So that's to have a total of number going in. So it's like you go into a classroom, I'm standing by the door, I'm just counting how many people are going in there. So we're using this as an example to kind of go over how to create classes. So that's what we're going to be doing. And of course, we're going to be using some other ones to go in there. So if we have this tally, what kind of a data do we need to track?
Integers.
Say what?
Integers.
Did you say integer?
Yeah.
Yeah, but what is it?
Numbers.
Yeah, the number. So we need to keep track of that number. So that would be my instance variable. So when we are doing our hey, yesterday I got my vaccine shot. Hey, I'm ready for the school. Okay, so we need to keep track of this number, the counter, or whatever you want to call it. So that's what we're going to keep track of it. So when we're talking about a class, we're talking about the three things. One is the name of the class. Two is the data that we're going to be tracking. And the third one is the methods or the actions that's going to happen with this class. So I have a car. My car, we're going to have a class for car. So it's going to have some data. License plate, VIN number, color, number of doors, number of tires, owner. These are all the data that I need to keep track of my car or a car class. And then I'm going to have some methods. So my method can change my data. So I'm going to register my car. So the name of the owner is going to change. I'm going to paint my car. So the color of my car is going to change. I am going to change the tires. So I can potentially have the size of a tire different or the model different. So there are some things that we can do. So the actions in general are methods. In C++, you call them functions. Here we call them methods. And then the data that we need to track. So in this case, we have an object or a class that's called counter. We're going to call it counter. we got to come up with good names for our classes. So it's going to have some meaning for it. So we are keeping track of the value. You can call it number, you can call it anything you want. And then the methods, the action that happens to this class is click, which every time you click on it, and then it's going to be a get value. So every time you click on it, it's going to add 1 to the total, and I'm going to get the value of the total. What is missing over here from the action part, from the method part?
Reset.
Reset. So we need to reset it so we can start all over again. And of course, if it's going to be an advanced one, we might have another button for deduct in case somebody go outside, we can deduct it. But we are making it simple for now to understand the concept, and then we can change it. So each counter needs to store variable that keeps track of the number of simulated button click. And the question is, how do you construct an object from a class counter? How do you call click method? And how do you call get value? So those are the things that we're going to be addressing. So to create a new object, we saw this in your chapter 2. We're going to use the word new, and then we're going to fix this. Yeah, that's not what I want to do. So we are we're going to be using something like new to create a new object. So if I have a class, I need to create an object before I use it. So if I have a blueprint of a house, I have to build a house to use it. If I have a concept of what the car is, somebody has to make a car before I use it. So we need the existence of that class. The existence of a class is going to be called an object. So the class itself is just a template. It is just a concept, but we have to create one to use it. And then we're going to be calling the method. Remember, we did this in chapter 2. We're going to be using a dot operator, and it only works if I have an object. So it doesn't work on a class. So if I want to repair a faucet in a kitchen, then I have to have a kitchen faucet to fix it, to repair it. If I want to paint car, I have to have the physical car before I paint it. So we're going to be using a dot operator to call the method click, and then I'm going to be using the dot operator to get the value. So click, the new one, that's going to have a 0, and click, it should give me a 2. Any questions so far? My CS2 students are very quiet. I am expecting a lot of questions from you guys. These are brand new to you. Don't be shy. Okay, so instance variables are the data that we want to keep track of for our object. So if I have an object, if I have a car, I want to keep track of who is the owner of this car. What's the license plate of this car? What is the VIN? So the data that I need is going to be my instance variables. We are going to be talking about using the word private. Private means it is not available to public. So whatever I have in my house is private to me. It is not open to the public. Whatever I have in my car, it is generally private. So if somebody wants to know who is the owner of the car, I have to give them a way to know it. They wouldn't know by looking at the car, they wouldn't know who's the owner. So we're going to set it to private. Some of the things with the car, we just set it to public. We don't have a choice. So for example, somebody can go to my car and know what the color is, but the actual setting the color of my car, they cannot change it. They have to have a permission. They have to have a way of changing the color of my car. So even though you can see the color, that is a method of getting the data, you are not going to be able to change the color without my permission. So the setting the color of my car, it is my permission, and I will let you know how you can do it. So we have the methods that can change this data, and we have some methods that's going to get me the data. So get the color, set the color. We're going to get to those. But for now, what we're talking about is what kind of a data do we keep track of it? So can you think of an object around you? Look around and tell me an object that you see.
Your phone?
Phone, okay. What kind of a data do you keep for your phone?
So for the private, I think is the
Not the
chips and-
private. Well, let's talk about the data in general.
Okay.
What kind of a information do you have for your phone?
Your contact information,
So what again?
like contact information.
No, like okay, we can think about the contact information inside the phone, but we are talking about the object of the phone right now. So my phone has a manufacturing, it's Samsung or iPhone, it's going to have its size, it's going to be a certain size, certain color. What else identify my car, my phone?
CPU frequency, GPU
Say what again?
performance, CPU frequency and GPU
performance. You can talk about that. Okay, the operating
Camera.
system that you're using in there. Okay, so
Camera
when you want to
lens.
brag your phone to somebody, you say, "Hey, I got the better phone than you." You're going to be talking about the actual data of the phone.
Yeah.
Correct? Yes? No?
Yes.
Give me another object.
Camera lens.
Camera. Okay. Same thing with the camera. What is it that I can identify the camera with? What kind of a data do I keep for a camera?
The quality. Like
Quality. We always with these things, we always going to have the manufacturing as part of the data. Who made this camera? You might not see it right now, but if something goes wrong with your camera, you can look up those data. The quality, manufacturing, maybe the size of it, I don't know. So some things in that matter. So if I go with the student class, so if in college, we have a class for a student, what kind of information do we have in a student class?
student ID.
ID?
And like
So what again?
like sophomore, freshman, that kind of stuff. Like which
Well,
year
before that, aren't you supposed to have the name of the student?
Oh yeah, the name.
So you need
Maybe
the
the age.
name, maybe the age, maybe what else?
Classes taking right now.
We can talk about that, but let's focus on the student only.
Oh,
We can talk about the
Nationality.
classes.
Nationality and citizenship.
You might
Mhm.
track of the citizenship in the class students. You would keep track of some kind of a address from the student. You would track of email, possibly a phone number, an optional email, the city that you're
Yeah.
using the address for. So we're talking about all the data that the student's going to be keeping track of in the school. If they have a class of students, what do they want to keep track of? So that's what we're talking about over here. And that's what's called instance variables. So those are the variables inside my class that's going to keep track of the data is required for the methods that I want to work with. So this book, when we're talking about the design, I'm hoping that we're going to get to the design soon. Soon, I'm talking about a few weeks, that we learn how to design things. And you can look at the design. There are totally different types of design, but your book is starting about, we're going to look at the actions that we need for this object. And for those actions, what kind of variables do I need? So if I want to register a car, what kind of a data do I need? I need the owner's name, or maybe some more additional stuff in that. So if I want to give a grade to a student, what kind of a data do I need? So this book is starting with the method, and then it's going to define the instance variables, and some other designs that go the other way around. So that's what we're going to be doing. Stop me if you have any questions. So when we're talking about access specifier, we're going to talk about the private, and we're going to talk about the public. Public is available to everybody in the whole world. Public, private is only available to me. And then I'm going to tell you how you can access it. So if a painter want to come in and paint my living room, I have to give them an access to do it. They cannot just walk in and start painting. So it's not available to everybody. But we give them an access to come in and do it. So the public is available to everyone. Private is only available to the class itself. So the variable is going to have a type, the int, double, string, and those kind of things. And of course, we're going to have the name of the variable. So in a rule of thumb is we're going to keep our data private. And we're going to define how outside world can access those private data. So we're just going to, you can make them all public. It's not, it's very, very, very bad design. So that's what we're going to do here. So if I create multiple objects, those objects are going to have the same variable, but the values inside of those variables are going to be different. So different objects are the same look and feel, but they have different values. So cars in general, they have the same template. Now I can have two cars, one made by Toyota, one made by Ford. So the value of make of my car can be changed depending on what it needs to be. So having a different value doesn't mean they are different classes, they are different objects. So that's something that I have seen some people coming from 3A and they mix it up sometimes. So different values for my variables, those are different objects. So in this case, we have a counter. So I can potentially have multiple doors to the arena, depending on how big is the arena. And I can have multiple counters. So I have a counter on north entrance, I have a counter on the west entrance, and they are similar, but they don't have the same value. So one of them is keeping track of the west entrance, the other one is keeping track of north entrance. So again, we're talking about, I'm sorry for those coming in from 3A, that some of these things might be too easy for you, but I have to cover it for my CS2 student. So we're going to be using the word private for our data. We're going to be having some kind of a data type, and then we're going to have a meaningful name here. So that's the way we're going to declare our instance variables. So in here, we have a clock that they look, feel the same, and they are, it's funny that sometimes if they ask us about what time is it, we might not be able to say it pretty soon because we don't use this type of clock anymore. We're using a digital clock. But the idea is they are all using the same class of clock, but the value of the time is different. So we have 4 objects of the same class, but each one of them is going to be holding different value for the time.